cannot answer the question why. It's beyond me. Disbelief was my first reaction when I heard what had happened to my family. Disbelief is my continuing reaction at the thought that anybody could do anything so crazy.
When missing turns to murder on the 9th of July 1996, a family of 4 had just relocated to the Garden of England, Kent. They would face such devastating loss and tragedy on one of the most miscarriages of justice from someone who brutally took the lives of 2 of them and severely injured 1 on a random attack down Cherry Garden Lane. Despite a man serving almost 25 years behind bars for this awful attack, this investigation continues to puzzle investigators. Hello and welcome back to my channel. I have taken a break for a very long time. I haven't posted much because of life, but today we'll be looking into the Chillenden murders, which has a lot of controversy around who did it, why they did it, and just generally what had happened. Just want to state again that these are my opinions and my opinions alone. I have researched a lot of this case, watched multiple things, documentaries, so everything stated is my opinion and my opinion alone. On Friday the 9th of July in 1996, in a small village of Chillenden near Canterbury, a family of 4, including their dog Lucy, had woken up on a Friday excited to finish the week. The girls, Megan, 6, and Josie, 9, had a swim gala and brownies, so they were really looking forward to it on a Friday and just to finish the week on a high. Sean and Lynn, their parents, were also it's Friday, a busy morning, get the girls ready to go to school. So it started off as a normal morning with them waking up. They usually would eat breakfast in the kitchen. However, on a lovely day, because they lived in the countryside, they would sometimes sit outside. But on this occasion, it was inside. They had become very well-known faces to the community, despite moving down from Wales 2 months prior. And they were known for being a friendly family. They were very in the community, and they just came across as a happy, loving family unit. So back to our timeline. They had woken up, started getting ready for school, sat down for their family breakfast. Sean drove Megan and Josie to school and then headed to Canterbury because he worked in the local university himself. As Sean settled into work, Lynn was known for getting on with housework. She loved gardening, loved it a lot. She's known to be a green thumb. She'd be in the front garden, the back garden, speaking to people that would pass by. The girls were also very, very excited for their swimming gala and, of course, brownies. And for those who don't know what brownies is, it's like a scouts kind of situation where they would learn about wildlife, how to fend for themselves. It's very DOV, but for children. Sean, during this time, he took a trip into Canterbury to check on his bike, which was being repaired, and then he also took a trip to the library to return some books that the girls had taken out. And that was mainly his day: the library, the bike shop, and work. The only reason why we are identifying Sean's timeline right now is because police tend to follow close to the family when an incident occurs. It was reaching the end of the school day around 3 p.m. and Lynn decided to pick the girls up from school by walking down Cherry Garden Lane. This is a route they had become familiar with after moving down. It was quick. It was a lovely walk through the fields and it passed woodlands. It was just a nice little walk. So she headed off around 3 o'clock with their dog Lucy. This was the last movement we are aware of Lynn and Lucy from investigators, was they headed down this trail. 7 p.m. Sean hadn't heard from Lynn since this morning, as they were due to return off the coach from the swimming gala, and Lynn was to pick them up with Lucy along the trail. At first, he wasn't too concerned. It seemed Lynn may have taken them to brownies or something else, so he decided to start prepping dinner and cooking for when the girls would return home. He was at first confused to returning home to an empty home. However, he feared something small had happened. Maybe the dog had gone missing, or the family had gone out looking for Lucy. Mid-dinner prep, the phone began to ring. A friend of a family named Liz phoned to ask if everything was okay. Sean was very confused as why she was asking, is everything okay? It was only because she was scheduled to pick up the girls at 5 p.m. for brownies, but when she had arrived, no one was home and there was no answer to the door. 7:30 p.m. At this point, Sean was beginning to be very concerned as he hadn't heard from Lynn and was unsure why they wouldn't have been home at 5 p.m. He tried to rationalise the situation. He tried to hope for the best. He didn't want to assume something awful had happened, but he was concerned. He was worried, as any parent, husband, anyone would be if they hadn't heard from their loved ones. He phoned multiple friends in that situation to see if they had heard from her or the children. During this time was passing. He was very scatty. He wanted to ask anyone and everyone if they had heard from them or anything, literally anything. 9 p.m. Sean's concern grew and grew as time was getting on, and he was unsure why Lynn would be out this late with the girls and Lucy. It was then he contacted the police to file a missing report for her and his daughters and Lucy, the dog. It was at this point he decided to try and search for himself. He drove down the lanes where the girls would have walked to school or where Lynn would walk to pick the girls up from school. He would then be shouting out all through the fields with his torch, trying to see if even Lucy would run back to him from hearing his name or just anyone would respond to him. He then contacts the vets to see, as we said before, if something had happened to Lucy, and he just hadn't been contacted and she was too wrapped in sorting out if something had happened. He even phoned all of the local hospitals to see if they had been there, and they just failed to contact him. Nothing. There was no trace of them anywhere at all, and he was so lost, confused. He didn't understand what was going on, and he didn't want to fear the worst. Sean was frantic at this point and he couldn't figure out what had happened or where his family was. In this moment, he contacted the police again just to say he did fear for their safety and it was out of the ordinary for all of them to go missing with no contact, nothing. But luckily, since the first phone call when he contacted them, they'd already set the ball rolling. They were sending people to his address, dog units to try and find them and send out a search party for the girls and for Lucy. 11 p.m. When the police showed up to the Russell residence, the whole unit was dispatched to look around the property, starting with the fields that surrounded their home and questioning Sean himself. As I've stated before, a lot of investigations start with the people that are close to the family, like husbands, partners, aunties, uncles, just relatives, anyone, just because a lot of the time it is someone closer to home. So Sean was questioned in regard to his marriage, to whether or not they were having issues in their marriage, to warrant Lynn taking the children away from him. The police stated he must remain at the property if she was to return, so he wasn't able to search alongside law enforcement. 11:30 p.m. Liz, who was the one who phoned during prep for dinner, came to the property to support Sean in this investigation and also just to explain the timeline. At 5 p.m. what happened when she had arrived at the property and no one had answered the door. This was also to support Sean during this painful procedure of the search. It had been 6 hours since they were last seen at school. 6 hours of unaccounted time of where they were, what they were doing and what had happened to them. Unfortunately, it wasn't long until all three bodies and their dog was discovered just 100 to 200 feet away from the property, down the lanes, laying in bushes. The grisly discovery led investigators to believe all three were dead, where they had been ambushed and brutally attacked. In an interview, Sean told them he knew the demeanour of the officers had changed when they walked back into his home. The sentence that rang out through his head and his home was, "There seems to be suspicious circumstances." He went numb and went into autopilot of what's happened to my girls, what's going on, and he just wanted an explanation for what had happened and why they were laying 100 to 200 metres in the bushes away from his home. He was asked to head to Deal police station to answer some questions, but was given the opportunity to rest beforehand so he could go in the morning if he pleased. However, he denied this. He said no, and he wanted to get this investigation rolling and find out the truth to what had happened to his girls. He stated in an interview that his whole world collapsed. He didn't know what to do anymore. He was so lost. He'd lost everyone in his family who he cared about. And he did state that he had suicidal tendencies and it broke him. He went numb and he didn't know what to do. Saturday, the 10th of July, 1996 at 6 a.m, Sean began to help police map out the accounts of his family and the movements on the day of the horrific attack had taken place. This is when the police officer told Sean about his daughter Josie, who was 9 years old, had survived the attack and was in critical condition in hospital. In that moment, his whole demeanour, his whole attitude towards the investigation had changed. He no longer felt like he had nothing to live for. He had to fight for his daughter. He had to fight for justice for Josie, because he's lost his wife and his youngest. All he had left was Josie. When I was researching into this investigation, one of the officers had said to Sean, did they have lots of freckles? And it was the minute detail of describing his daughters, but he said that he knew just from that it was Josie, because she had loads of little freckles all over her face. And Sean was then sent to London Hospital, where he would have to identify Josie and basically stay with her to make sure she was okay and help her with her recovery process. The news of this disgusting act on a mother and a child had spread like wildfire throughout the community. Because of the reports of it, it was very hard not to figure out who it was. And it was shocking to the village, because nothing went on there. It was a quiet, dainty little town, and the media made this situation completely difficult for them. They made it obvious who the victims were and what had happened to them into detail. And due to it being reported on radio, television, print, even like magazines and newspapers, it spread like wildfire. The media were also quite disgraceful in this situation. They were hanging in bushes trying to get pictures of the crime scene. They were also hanging around schools trying to get people to speak in regards to the situation. They had no respect or understanding towards the victims. All they wanted was the latest scoop and what had happened and how it had happened, and no privacy was given to the family at that time. It was difficult for the police as well, because with the media outlets hanging around trying to get information, they were around the crime scene, and it was such a large crime scene because it wasn't a field, it wasn't a public area. Anything could have been discarded left, right and centre, but luckily the police, they were very good with preserving the crime scene, tape everywhere in large areas to ensure that no one would contaminate it or make it any worse than it was. So what actually happened? So Sean, after this, wanted to move himself and Josie back to Wales, as living in the area was too heartbreaking, and he wanted Josie to recover closer to home and closer to family and just away from where the crime had happened, and to have no ties to it, so her recovery would be a lot easier. We were only now able to identify the sequence of events due to Josie's bravery and resilience. Josie, throughout her time of recovery, she would scrapbook what had happened, and she would also make little figurines to basically show people what had happened to her sister and her mum. And by doing this, she was able to piece together what had happened. But this wasn't until December 1996, which was 6 weeks after the recovery, she was able to use her voice as well to tell detectives what had really happened. So what really happened? On the 9th of July 1996, back to the day of the incident, the three of them had been returning on foot down Cherry Garden Lane around 4:20 p.m. when a car passed them. Josie even recalled waving at the driver of the car as it passed by. As they walked further down the lane, the car was parked straight across the track, blocking their path. The driver got out of the vehicle, which was a man, and he was holding a hammer in his hand. He then approached the family and demanded money from Lynn, and she basically said that she didn't have her purse, but she left it at home and was willing to go back home to retrieve some money for him. He denied that. He didn't want that. He wanted something quick, there, easy to take. And this is when Lynn told her daughter Josie to run. Run to the nearest person for help, get anyone. But she didn't make it far. He grabbed her and hit her on the head with the hammer he had held in his hand. He then walked the three of them and Lucy the dog off the track to a dense area just off of the path, where he tied them up with strips torn from Josie's blue swimming towel, a bootlace, a pair of tights, and he also blindfolded them. He hit Lynn on the head 15 times, causing severe head trauma and killing her. Josie's skull was smashed. Her brain tissue was protruding from the wound behind her left ear and lacerations to her skull, which led to extensive tearing to the covering of her brain. Megan was then under the same fate, being hit 7 times, suffering massive skull fractures and exposing her brain tissue. After this disgusting attack, the man got back into his car and just drove away from the scene, leaving these girls and their mum tied up, Lynn dying from the trauma instantly, Megan also passing, and Josie, for some reason, she was holding on to her life. After about half an hour of the murders had taken place, he was spotted, whoever this person was spotted a mile away from the scene in an agitated state. No one could identify him. He was just very agitated, and the bag of bloodied towel strips was dropped in a hedgerow, and he'd left the area of his attack. Shortly after this information was discovered, Josie would tell police she thought the attacker was blonde with spiky hair and about in his 20s. After this followed suit a manhunt to find the most inhumane person who carried out this attack. The news had shocked the whole nation, and people were expected to be on high alert for this man, and his drawn up image circulated all of the media. This led to a lot of parents trying to protect their children by sitting outside the schools and just having coffee on the edge of the playgrounds with the teachers. It allowed them to know that their kids were safe, and it also kind of gave the teachers a bit of reassurance that they were safe too. And the whole community came together to try and protect each other. Everyone, absolutely everyone, questioned the safety of their children, as this man was still not caught, was still not identified. No one knew who it was who had done this to them. Whilst the media were speculating on who this man was, a psychiatric doctor came forward to police about a patient named Michael Stone. He had been mentioning acts of violence in regards to this case, and he just brought up things that had happened that weren't necessarily out in the tabloids. The police began identifying whether he was mentally, physically and emotionally capable of committing these murders and trying to build a case around this man. So let's talk about Michael. Michael John Goodman was born in Royal Tunbridge Wells on the 7th of June 1960 and was one of 5 children. His father was unknown due to the different surname, so that's why he goes by Michael Stone, because his father was just, no one knew who his dad was. Stone had a turbulent childhood. He had faced a lot of domestic violence, to which then he was put into a care home, like a kids' care home. He then also, unfortunately, faced abuse in that care system as well. He has said and stated in multiple interviews that he had witnessed his mum being beaten with a hammer. His mum's former partner had also attacked another man with a meat cleaver in their home. He was prone to uncontrollable outbursts and aggressive mood swings. From the age of 9, he began using drugs and committing crimes. Stone has a long criminal history of violence and drug misuse. There were so many to list, so many stories, so many incidences, and I broke it down into 3 different sentences. He served 3 prison sentences in the 1980s for robbery, grievous bodily harm, and assault occasioning actual bodily harm. He was known to police for carrying weapons, including knives and guns, and he became a figure of the criminal underworld in the Medway towns of Kent. Stone was also known to be very violent with previous partners. His former partner Rachel came forward to the press and police and recounted that he'd beaten her so badly, so many times, that she went to the police and tried to press charges on him. However, she refused to give evidence, so the charges were dropped, and Stone didn't face any kind of consequences from this action. When I read this, I believe that maybe it could have been from the fear of intimidation against him, or anything that she was worried it could happen again in the cycle of abuse. You get scared and you feel intimidated. Like, there's this control and manipulation that a partner may hold on you that you don't want to face it, and you made that first step of reporting it, but then you can fear that it could happen again, or they could come after you. Stone was then released from prison in 1993 prior to the murders of the Russell family, where he had received support for his drug addiction and mental health. He was later sectioned in 1994 in a hospital in Hull with the diagnosis of personality disorder and paranoid psychosis. He was prescribed regular injections of medications, but his treatment was affected by the overuse of heroin, so it didn't work because he was still a consistent user. He was passed on to other medical professionals as he was quoted to be too dangerous and had ended up in West Kent Authority. July 1997. A year after the murders, 37-year-old Michael Stone was arrested for the murders of Lynn and Megan Russell and the attack onto Josie Russell. The police had received tip-offs resulting in a reconstruction of the crime from Crime Watch.
He was staring hard at her, and she vividly recalls his face. This is the e-fit she compiled last year, and police today revealed that Josie has been shown this and says it's very like the man who ambushed and attacked her. He's in his 30s with chubby cheeks. His hair was gingery blonde and straight with a short fringe.
This leads us back to the doctor who had approached the police, who stated that he would tell the nurses he dreamt about killing and torturing children, and he would add that even walking past them, he would want to lead them into the woods and harm them, which was concerning to hear at the least because that's what happened. That's where the girls were harmed, near woods, tied up and tortured the way they were. He was also stated he was so angry at the world and that he was going to do something bad. He warned them he was going to do something bad. He begged and begged and begged to be admitted as an inpatient to the psychiatric unit, but he was refused as he was seen as too dangerous. A friend of Stone also contacted the police after the Crime Watch episode aired and believed Stone looked like the e-fit that had been released with the hair, and he'd been acting very strangely. Another friend also said that he'd seen him wearing blood-soaked clothes on the day of the murders, although Stone states he had been in the fight. Evidence. Stone had no alibi for the day. He said he could not remember due to him being on drugs. And he did state that he felt like more than a year could have passed. He had no idea of the time, what he was doing, and where he was. He maintained he didn't know what he was doing the week of the murders, let alone the day of the murders. However, a receipt proved that he was at the cash converters in Chatham at 12:21 on the day of the murders. This was putting him roughly 40 miles away from where it had happened, and he could have easily travelled down in an hour to be at that location for 4:20 when the murders occurred. Stone testifies that he didn't know Chillenden at all, but friends thought this and said he used to state that he knew the area like the back of his hand because he had grown up in a children's home almost 2 miles away from where the murder location had happened. There was no justification to why he would be at the murder scene or in Chillenden for that matter. He lived in Gillingham, almost 30 miles away, but to fuel his addiction, he would rob homes and try and sell high-valued items. So there was an inkling that maybe he tried to steal from areas in Chillenden because of the high-value homes and what could have been in them. The police had their suspect, but there was nothing solid connecting Stone to the crime. September 1997. 14 months after the crime, police had their suspect, but without a confession to the murders or even DNA connected to the crime, they weren't officially able to charge Stone for any kind of offence, crime, nothing. He was placed into Canterbury Prison, where he made a confession to fellow inmate Damien Daly. He informed the police him and Stone would talk through the pipelines where he had made some shocking confessions. Stone was then arrested and trialled at Maidstone Crown Court. It was at this moment where 2 more inmates came forward with similar accounts to what Stone had confided in them whilst in prison and also in the gym area. October 1998. 2 years later, the police were finally ready with confessions, accounted witness confessions and circumstantial evidence. The case was ready to face a judge and its jurors. From the get-go, a lot of narrative was questioned by a lot of journalists. The attack was scripted as if it was a frenzied attack. It was quick, done, over within seconds. However, when reading out the narrative, it was clear from the way the scene was presented that it would have taken minutes, not seconds, to carry out this attack in this form. A bootlace was used to try and solidify the case. The allegation was that this is something people would use for injecting heroin to tie around their arms, and this was found, and because Stone was known for being a heroin addict, this is something that would hold great value in the case to try and put Stone in that timeline of what happened and when it happened. Josie was also able to give her account in court, recollecting what happened to her mum and her sister during this time. I can't imagine what it was like standing up there facing your potential killer and reading out the narrative of what had happened to you and your sisters and one of the most traumatic events. And a lot of people said it was such a strong statement and a strong testimony, and everyone was so proud of her for being able to stand up there and say her case and speak about what had happened to her. The jury, with a 10-2 majority, found Michael Stone guilty of murder. Stone's reaction to this was standing up, shouting, screaming, where he had to be restrained. A lot of people hadn't seen a reaction like that in court for a very long time, and people questioned whether this was a reaction of anger of being caught, or whether that was a reaction of a innocent man had been found guilty for a crime he didn't commit. However, celebrations were short-lived by everyone, because the day after the trial, where Stone was convicted for the murders of Lynn, Megan Russell, and the attack of Josie Russell, a media frenzy hit everywhere. Articles were released, stories were on the television, that the inmates who had come forward and had their witness testimony denied it. They lied. They said they didn't hear it, and Stone never made any admission to him. With this inmate retracting his statement, this allowed Stone to appeal his conviction due to the case now falling apart, and the integrity was no longer there because those victim statements held great weight to the case to allow him to be convicted. The appeal of the trial allowed Stone to have a retrial. The trial was moved to Nottingham due to any judgment from the media influencing the new jurors' ideas, and people were under the impression that everyone would have forgotten about the case 2 years later and no one would remember what had happened, but people did. You wouldn't forget a case like that was spread like wildfire in the media. It was still consistently being reported on, and I don't understand how people would assume that they wouldn't know it just by moving up to Nottingham. The 5th of September 2001, the trial began at Nottingham Crown Court. The case only left one witness testimony from an inmate in Canterbury prison, and the other cell confessions were thrown out. 11 hours of deliberations, the jury found Stone guilty of 3 counts of murder. Considering a lot more evidence was thrown out, and there was considerably less evidence to prove he was guilty or even at the scene or any connection to the scene, they still found him guilty, which held quite a lot of weight for everyone to solidify that that's the right man. He's not innocent. However, it gets more interesting. 25 years on, there's still no forensic evidence which ties Stone to the murder scene. So, was he innocent? There was no DNA or nothing, literally nothing that could tie him to the scene at all. It's been widely speculated that hairs at the scene didn't match Lynn, Megan, Josie, or Stone. None of the hairs matched anyone that was at the scene. The car at the scene was never identified. Linking him to the scene was simply impossible. The only thing that could link him to the scene was the fact he had no alibi for the day, he didn't know where he was, and the fact he knew the area, and the witness testimony. 3 things that could only link him. The fact he was in a pawn shop in Canterbury. He had no alibi, and he knew the area, and then of course the witness testimony, but obviously there's a lot of speculation whether that was legit. But what they did during the case is they took the jurors and a sound expert to the prison in Canterbury. They had the sound expert sit in the cell in which he was conversing with the inmate. The jurors then went into the other cell, and this sound guy would read out Harry Potter in a book to see if they could hear it on the other side, and jurors confirmed they could hear it. So this held a massive weight that what he was saying was true, because there's no way not, if they could hear what was being said by the sound expert, then he must have been conversing with this inmate through the pipelines. There was so much pressure for police to get a result from this case. They had the media hounding them for answers. They had the families hounding them for answers. They had the children from the school and the families that had children in the area needing results because of how dangerous this situation was. So do you think Michael Stone was truly the perpetrator in his murders? I'm a bit lost with this. I have no idea. I think his evidence and his history does hold a lot whole lot that he could be someone involved, but there's just nothing. There's no scientific data that could match him with the scene. One name who came up in the connection as an alternative person who could have carried out these murders was Levi Belfield. He was a known serial killer with multiple offences, which was targeting women. He used to target women who just got off the train and they were walking alone and vulnerable. His MO was very similar to what had happened to the Russell family. He would target women from the back with a blunt instrument, so it does fit the profile and MO. He denied any involvement with the Russell murders in 2017. However, recently he produced a 4-page document that he carried out, saying that he had carried out the Lynn and Megan Russell and the assault on Josie Russell. But, however, digging into more research, his ex-partner came forward and denies any claims that Levi had anything to do with the Russell murders. She also said that she wouldn't ever defend him in that way because of what he had done and who he had harmed during his time as a serial killer. However, she stated he did in fact have an alibi. On the afternoon of the 9th of July 1996, she can recount every movement of him as it was her birthday. So why would he confess to murders which weren't in no relation to him? Was it more fame, or did he wanted to appear more notorious? I found out he loves attention and he loved it. He loved the media circus around his crimes, so maybe it was just a way of drawing more attention to him. So my thoughts and opinions was, did Michael Stone really commit this crime? What are your thoughts and opinions? Almost 27 years later, and this still puzzles investigators. Positive from this case is Josie has gone from strength to strength. In multiple interviews that she's had with like Lorraine, with BBC, she has stated she's not a victim, she's not a survivor, she's just her. She just wants to be known as her for her artwork that she does. She regularly holds exhibitions in Wales, which focuses on the beauty of Wales. All of her work is available online on her Instagram. I had a look, it's actually really cool. She's also an ambassador for Born Free Foundation, which is a foundation that focuses on saving and protecting animals from exploitation and conserving threatened species. Amazing. So, in all, this case was heartbreaking, and I can't believe there's still a question mark headed over this case, like of who did it. Nothing ties anyone to the scene, and has an innocent man been convicted on a crime he didn't commit. I'm slightly a bit lost with it, but it was an interesting one, and all I can hope is that one day they will get full justice. But for now, they're at peace, they're happy, and they are pushing forward with their lives. So thank you again for watching this video, and if you like it, give it a like. I'm always open to case suggestions, and yeah, I'll try my best. Thank you. Bye.